She pretends to be his secretary's daughter's mom at a school event. Then the powerful CEO falls for her deception while she's drowning in debt and fighting for custody. One impulsive lie, one unexpected connection, and their lives change forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn rain pelted against the windows of Westfield Elementary as Emma Taylor rushed through the front doors, 15 minutes late and soaking wet. Her ancient Honda had chosen today of all days to break down 3 blocks away, forcing her to sprint the rest of the distance in her second-hand blazer that did little to shield her from the downpour. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she gasped to the receptionist, pushing strands of damp brown hair from her face. "I'm here for career day in Ms. Peterson's class." The receptionist barely glanced up. "Name and occupation?" Emma hesitated. She wasn't supposed to be here at all. She was supposed to be at her second job waiting tables at Rosie's diner, not pretending to be someone she wasn't at her niece Lily's school. But when her sister Diane had called in tears that morning, Diane's boss had demanded she fly to Boston for an emergency meeting, meaning she'd miss her daughter's career day presentation. Emma couldn't say no. "The other parents are all successful professionals," Diane had sobbed over the phone. "Lily's been talking about this for weeks. She'll be heartbroken if no one shows up for her." "What am I supposed to say?" Emma had asked. "I work 2 jobs just to make rent. I'm hardly inspiration material." "Just pretend to be me," Diane had suggested desperately. "Say you work as an executive assistant at Morgan Industries. Lily's only 7. She won't correct you." Now, standing dripping in the school office, Emma made her decision. Diane Taylor, executive assistant at Morgan Industries. 5 minutes later, Emma stood outside room 112, straightening her wrinkled blazer and taking a deep breath. Through the small window in the door, she could see children sitting cross-legged on a colorful rug while a parent in an expensive suit talked animatedly at the front of the room. She spotted Lily immediately, her niece's copper pigtails and freckled face a mirror image of Diane's. The little girl was scanning the doorway anxiously, and when she spotted Emma, her face lit up with relief and joy. Emma slipped inside just as the parent finished speaking. Ms. Peterson, a young teacher with kind eyes, immediately approached. "You must be Lily's mom," she whispered. "We're so glad you could make it. You're just in time. We have one more speaker before you." Emma nodded, heart pounding as she took a seat in the back. She'd only agreed to this charade because she couldn't bear to see Lily disappointed. A little white lie, that's all it was. What harm could it do? The next parent was a doctor who passed around a stethoscope for the children to try. When he finished, Ms. Peterson smiled brightly. "And now, we'll hear from Lily's mom, who works at one of the biggest companies in the city. Mrs. Taylor, would you like to come up?" 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her as Emma walked to the front of the classroom. Lily beamed with pride, and Emma felt a stab of guilt. She wasn't Lily's mother. She was just the struggling aunt who could barely keep her own life together, let alone inspire a room full of second graders. "Hello, everyone," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "My name is Diane Taylor, and I work at Morgan Industries as an executive assistant to Mr. Morgan himself." She paused, scrambling to remember details from Diane's complaints about her demanding boss. "That means I help organize his schedule, prepare for important meetings, and make sure everything runs smoothly so he can focus on running the company." A little boy in the front row raised his hand. "Is your boss rich?" Emma laughed despite herself. "Yes, I suppose he is." "Do you get to boss other people around?" asked a girl with braided hair. "Not exactly," Emma replied. "But I do help coordinate between different departments, which means I need to be organized and clear about what needs to happen." As she continued speaking, Emma found herself warming to the role. She described the importance of communication skills, attention to detail, and problem-solving, all things she actually used in her real jobs. The children seemed genuinely interested, especially when she described helping to organize the company's annual charity gala. "My mom says, Mr. Morgan is the most powerful man in the city," Lily piped up suddenly, her voice filled with importance. "She says he's handsome but grumpy." The class erupted in giggles, and Emma felt her cheeks flush. "Well, I wouldn't say—" The classroom door opened, cutting her off mid-sentence. A tall man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit entered, his presence immediately commanding attention. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his jawline could have been carved from marble, but it was his eyes that caught Emma's attention. Storm gray and intensely focused. Ms. Peterson hurried over. "Mr. Morgan, we weren't expecting you until later." The blood drained from Emma's face. Alexander Morgan, CEO of Morgan Industries, Diane's boss, the man she was currently pretending to work for. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "My meeting ended early," he replied, his deep voice resonating through the classroom. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. Mrs. Taylor was just telling us about her work as your executive assistant." Alexander Morgan's penetrating gaze shifted to Emma, confusion flickering across his features. "Mrs. Taylor?" Emma froze, panic rising in her throat. This wasn't supposed to happen. Diane had assured her that her boss never attended these school functions. He always sent the company's PR director instead. Before she could respond, Lily jumped up. "That's my mom. She works for you." Alexander's brow furrowed deeper. "Your mother is Diane Taylor." Emma managed a weak smile. "I was just finishing up. Please, don't let me keep you from your presentation." She hurried back to her seat, heart hammering so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Alexander watched her retreat, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to the class with a practiced smile. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Alexander Morgan, CEO of Morgan Industries." As he launched into a child-friendly explanation of what his company did, Emma contemplated how quickly she could escape once the presentation ended. She'd apologize to Lily later. Right now, she needed to disappear before she was exposed as a fraud. Alexander was surprisingly good with the children, answering their questions with patience and even demonstrating how their latest tablet prototype worked. But throughout his presentation, Emma caught him glancing in her direction, his gaze calculating. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of career day, Emma grabbed her damp blazer and made a beeline for the door. She'd almost reached it when she felt a hand on her arm. "Mrs. Taylor, could I speak with you for a moment?" Emma turned slowly to face Alexander Morgan. Up close, he was even more intimidating. At least 6 feet tall with shoulders that filled out his expensive suit perfectly. And those eyes? Sharp, intelligent, missing nothing. "Actually, I need to get going," she began, but he cut her off. "I think we both know you're not Diane Taylor." The classroom had emptied except for Miss Peterson, who was helping Lily gather her things. Emma lowered her voice to a whisper. "Please, I can explain. Just not here." Alexander studied her for a moment, then nodded. "My car is outside. We can talk there." It wasn't a suggestion. Emma glanced at Lily, who was chatting happily with her teacher, then back at Alexander. She had no choice. Following him out to the parking lot, she tried to formulate an explanation that wouldn't get Diane fired. A sleek black Bentley waited at the curb, a driver standing beside it. Alexander opened the back door himself, gesturing for Emma to get in. She hesitated, then slid onto the buttery leather seat, intensely aware of her rain-dampened clothes and scuffed shoes against the luxury interior. Alexander joined her, closing the door and creating an intimate space that smelled of expensive cologne and leather. He didn't speak immediately, just studied her with those penetrating eyes. "Your name," he finally said. It wasn't a question. "Emma Taylor. Diane is my sister. And why exactly were you impersonating my executive assistant at her daughter's school function?" Emma exhaled slowly. "Diane was called to the Boston office this morning for an emergency meeting. She was devastated about missing Lily's career day. The little girl has been talking about it for weeks, and with her father not in the picture." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "I'm sorry for the deception. If anyone should be punished, it's me, not Diane." Something shifted in Alexander's expression. Surprise, perhaps, at her willingness to protect her sister. "The Boston meeting was my idea," he said after a moment. "We're having issues with the Northeast Distribution Center." "Then you know she couldn't say no." "Indeed." He leaned back, his gaze still fixed on her. "What do you do, Emma Taylor, when you're not impersonating corporate employees?" The question caught her off guard. "I work at the public library during the day and wait tables at Rosie's Diner 4 nights a week. 2 jobs." "Impressive." Emma couldn't tell if he was being sincere or condescending. "Not everyone has the luxury of one high-paying position, Mr. Morgan." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Alexander, please." "And I'm well aware of economic realities, Miss Taylor. I started with nothing." "Emma," she corrected automatically. "Emma," he repeated, and something about the way her name sounded in his deep voice made her stomach flutter. The car had started moving, she realized belatedly. "Where are we going?" "You're soaking wet, and based on what you told the children, you know a surprising amount about my company. I'd like to continue our conversation somewhere more comfortable." Alarm bells rang in Emma's head. "I need to get to work. My shift at the diner starts in an hour." Alexander pulled out his phone. "Which diner?" "Rosie's on 9th, but..." He was already dialing. "Hello, is this the manager at Rosie's Diner?" "This is Alexander Morgan." "Yes, that Alexander Morgan. I'm calling regarding your employee, Emma Taylor. I need her assistance with an urgent business matter this afternoon. I'll compensate the establishment for her missed shift, of course. Double her usual earnings should suffice." Emma stared at him in disbelief as he ended the call with a satisfied expression. "You can't just—" "I just did," he interrupted smoothly. "Problem solved. That's not— You can't just throw money around to rearrange people's lives." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Would you prefer to lose a shift's wages? Because I'm quite certain your manager would have simply replaced you for the day, not paid you to be absent." Emma pressed her lips together. He was right, and she couldn't afford to lose the income, especially with her custody hearing for Lily coming up next month. After her sister's ex-husband had suddenly reappeared demanding joint custody, Emma had promised to help with the legal fees, a promise she could barely keep. "Fine. Where are we going?" "My office. I think we have matters to discuss." The Morgan Industries headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming skyscraper downtown. Emma had passed it countless times, but never imagined she'd see the inside. The security guards nodded respectfully as Alexander led her through the lobby to a private elevator. "Aren't you concerned what people will think, bringing in a soggy stranger?" she asked as the elevator doors closed. Alexander's mouth quirked. "I'm not known for caring what people think." The elevator opened directly into a vast corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Rain still lashed against the glass, turning the view into an impressionist painting of gray and twinkling lights. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, gesturing to a seating area with sleek leather couches. "Would you like coffee? Tea?" "Coffee, please," Emma replied, too overwhelmed to refuse. While Alexander spoke quietly to his assistant through an intercom, Emma took in her surroundings. The office was minimalist but clearly expensive. Abstract art on the walls, a massive desk of some exotic wood, not a paper out of place. It spoke of power, control, and immense wealth. "Your presentation to the children was quite good," Alexander said, joining her on the adjacent couch. "You knew a surprising amount about what an executive assistant does." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "Diane talks about her job. A lot." "Does she?" His tone suggested this was news to him. "Mostly complaints," Emma admitted, then winced. "I shouldn't have said that." Alexander actually chuckled, the sound unexpectedly warm. "Diane is an excellent assistant, but I'm well aware I'm not the easiest person to work for." A young woman entered with a tray of coffee and an assortment of small pastries, setting it on the table between them. "Thank you, Jessica," Alexander said, dismissing her with a nod. Emma reached for the coffee, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Mr. Morgan?" "Alexander." "Alexander," she corrected. "I appreciate the coffee, but I still don't understand why I'm here. If you're not planning to fire Diane, what do you want from me?" He studied her over the rim of his own cup. "Direct. I like that." He set his coffee down. "First, no, I have no intention of firing Diane. What happened today was unexpected, but ultimately harmless." Relief flooded through Emma. "Thank you. However," he continued, "it did reveal something interesting. You managed to convince an entire classroom, including me momentarily, that you belonged in a corporate environment you've never actually worked in." Emma frowned. "I'm not sure what you're getting at. I'm in need of someone with exactly that skill set. Someone who can adapt quickly, speak confidently on topics they've just learned about, and handle unexpected situations with grace. For what purpose? Alexander leaned forward. I have a proposition for you, Emma Taylor. One that could solve some problems for both of us. Emma's wariness increased. What kind of proposition? I need a date for a series of upcoming social events. Someone intelligent and adaptable, who can navigate complex social situations. Someone who won't develop romantic expectations. Emma nearly choked on her coffee. You want to hire me to be your fake girlfriend? Think of it more as a social companion. These events are important for business relationships, but I'm tired of fending off matchmaking attempts from board members and business partners. Having a consistent companion would solve that problem. Emma set her cup down carefully. Why me? You could hire a professional escort. Or ask one of the undoubtedly numerous women who would be thrilled to date you. Something darker flashed across his features. My last relationship ended poorly. She was more interested in my bank account than my company. As for professionals, I need someone who can genuinely engage with complex business discussions, not just look decorative. And you think a librarian/waitress can do that? A librarian/waitress who successfully impersonated a corporate executive assistant on zero notice? Yes, I think you might be perfect. He named a figure that made Emma's eyes widen. Per event, plus all expenses, of course. The amount was more than she made in 2 months. With her mounting legal bills and the custody hearing approaching, it was a lifeline she desperately needed. What exactly would this entail? She asked cautiously. Accompanying me to dinners, charity galas, and the occasional weekend retreat, learning enough about my business to carry on intelligent conversations. Being charming but not overly familiar with my business associates. He paused, and maintaining absolute discretion about our arrangement. Emma's mind raced. The money would solve her immediate financial problems and help Diane with the custody battle. But pretending to date one of the most powerful men in the city, a man who radiated intensity and control from every pore, seemed dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with money. Why should I trust you? She asked bluntly. Alexander seemed taken aback by the question, as if no one ever questioned his trustworthiness. I'll have a contract drawn up detailing exactly what is and isn't expected. You'll be free to walk away at any time. Emma considered him this wealthy, powerful man offering a solution to her problems while creating a new set of complications. I need to think about it, she finally said. Alexander nodded, reaching into his jacket for a business card. My personal number. Call me when you decide. As he handed it to her, their fingers brushed, and Emma felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. If I agree, she said, taking the card, I have conditions of my own. His eyebrows rose slightly. Such as? My schedule at the library isn't flexible. Any events would have to work around it. Acceptable. And I won't lie to my family about the nature of our arrangement. Alexander considered this. You can tell your sister the truth. No one else. Emma nodded slowly. I'll let you know my decision tomorrow. I'll have my driver take you home, he said, standing. As Emma followed him back to the elevator, she caught him studying her reflection in the glass wall. Why were you really at the school today? She asked suddenly. Diane says you never attend those functions. Alexander's expression softened slightly. My nephew is in Ms. Peterson's class. My sister is overseas, so I promised I'd go in her place. The revelation that he too had been standing in for family made Emma see him in a new light. Perhaps they weren't so different after all, both willing to step outside their comfort zones for the children they loved. The elevator doors opened, and Alexander gestured for her to enter. As she passed him, he said quietly, For what it's worth, you made a very convincing executive assistant. Lily was clearly proud of you. The simple observation touched something in Emma's heart. Thank you, she whispered, as the doors closed between them. On the ride home, rain still drumming on the car roof, Emma stared at the business card in her hands. Alexander Morgan, CEO, embossed in simple black letters on heavy cream stock. A man who could solve her financial problems with what amounted to pocket change for him. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. How did it go? Did Lily believe you were me? Emma typed back. It went fine. Lily was great. But we need to talk. Your boss showed up. Three dots appeared immediately then. What? Are you okay? Did he fire me? No one's fired. It's complicated. I'll explain tonight. Emma put her phone away and leaned her head against the cool window, watching the city blur past. One impulsive decision to help her niece had led her to the backseat of a luxury car, contemplating an arrangement with a man who exuded power and control like others exuded cologne. The most disturbing part wasn't the deception she'd committed or even the proposition she'd received. It was the inexplicable flutter in her stomach when Alexander had said her name. The way his storm-gray eyes seemed to see past her carefully constructed defenses. The unwelcome awareness of him as a man, not just a wealthy CEO. That was a complication she definitely couldn't afford. Emma sat at her kitchen table that night, staring at the stack of bills illuminated by the single overhead light. Her apartment was small but neat. A one-bedroom walk-up in a neighborhood that was more affordable than fashionable. Books lined every available surface, her one indulgence in a life otherwise defined by careful budgeting. The amount Alexander Morgan had offered per event would cover 3 months of rent. It would pay for the lawyer Diane desperately needed to fight her ex-husband's sudden custody claim. A man who had abandoned Lily as a baby, but now, after marrying into money, wanted to play daddy again. Her phone screen lit up with Alexander's business card beside it. All she had to do was call. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Diane, still in her work clothes, eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Tell me everything," her sister demanded, stepping inside. "Is he gonna fire me? Did he say anything about the Boston meeting? Did Lily notice anything was wrong?" Emma guided her sister to the couch. "Breathe, Diane. Your job is safe. Lily had a great time, and Mr. Morgan was." She hesitated, searching for the right word, surprisingly understanding. Diane collapsed against the cushions. "Thank God. I can't lose this job, Em. Not with Mark trying to take Lily." She covered her face with her hands. "I'm sorry I put you in that position. I was desperate." "I know." Emma sat beside her, taking her sister's hand. "But there's something else. After he figured out who I really was, Mr. Morgan made me an offer." Diane lowered her hands, eyes widening. "What kind of offer?" Emma explained the proposition. Accompanying Alexander to social events, pretending to be his companion to deter matchmaking attempts, the generous compensation. "Are you serious?" Diane stared at her in disbelief. "Alexander Morgan wants to hire you as his fake girlfriend, the same man who made his last assistant cry because she brought him the wrong kind of sparkling water." "He wasn't that bad," Emma defended, then caught herself. "I mean, he was intense but not cruel." Diane studied her sister's face. "Oh my God, you like him." "What? No, I just met him!" "You've got that same look you had with Professor What's-His-Name in college. The one who broke your heart." Emma flushed. "This is strictly business." He made that very clear. "Men like Alexander Morgan don't do anything without multiple motives," Diane warned. "And he's been different lately. Distracted. Something happened with his last girlfriend. Nobody knows what exactly, but he's been even more closed off since they broke up." Emma remembered the shadow that had crossed Alexander's face when he mentioned his previous relationship. He said she was after his money. "Probably," Diane agreed, "but that wouldn't be enough to rattle him. He's dealt with gold diggers his whole life." She leaned forward earnestly. "Just be careful, Em. This could solve our financial problems, but I don't want you getting hurt." "It's just a business arrangement," Emma insisted. "A few social events, some polite conversation. Then I cash the check. No emotions involved." But later, after Diane had gone home, Emma found herself replaying her encounter with Alexander. The intensity of his gaze. The surprising gentleness when he spoke about his nephew. The brief, unexpected connection when they'd realized they were both attending the school, function out of love for children who weren't their own. With a decisive exhale, Emma picked up her phone and sent a text to the number on the card. "This is Emma Taylor. I accept your offer, pending review of the contract." His response came almost immediately. "Excellent. Contract will be delivered tomorrow. First event is Saturday evening. Formal attire. My driver will collect you at 7 p.m. Emma stared at the message. Saturday was only 3 days away. "I'll need more details about the event to prepare," she texted back. "Annual Children's Hospital Benefit Gala. Guest list includes major donors, hospital board, local celebrities. You'll be perfect. Perfect. The word hung in the air, carrying a weight Emma couldn't quite define. She put down her phone and wandered to her small closet, pushing aside the everyday clothes to reveal the one formal dress she owned, a deep blue gown she'd worn to a friend's wedding 2 years ago. It was simple but elegant, the most expensive piece of clothing she'd ever purchased. Would it be enough for an event where women would be dripping in designer labels and jewels? Would she be able to hold her own in conversations with the city's elite? For the first time, the magnitude of what she'd agreed to hit her. This wasn't just about pretending to be someone else for an hour in an elementary school classroom. This was stepping into a world completely foreign to her own, a world of wealth, power, and careful artifice. But she'd already said yes. And Alexander Morgan didn't strike her as a man who accepted second thoughts. The contract arrived by courier the next morning, delivered to the library where Emma worked. Her colleague Mia raised her eyebrows at the Morgan Industries envelope. "Secret admirer?" she teased as Emma slipped it into her bag. "Just some paperwork," Emma replied, busying herself with reshelving books in the history section. During her lunch break, she read through the contract in a quiet corner of the reference room. It was surprisingly straightforward. Attendance at specified events, confidentiality clauses, payment terms, and a clear statement that no romantic or sexual obligations were part of the agreement. It was, in essence, a performance contract, no different than hiring an actress. Except she wasn't an actress. She was a librarian with a part-time waitressing job and mounting debts, about to step into the spotlight alongside one of the city's most eligible bachelors. Emma signed the contract and dropped it off at the Morgan Industries headquarters on her way to the diner that evening. The security guard promised to deliver it to Mr. Morgan's office, eyeing her curiously as she hurried back out to catch her bus. Saturday arrived with a flurry of nerves. Emma spent the morning researching the children's hospital, memorizing key facts about their programs and recent initiatives. If she was going to convince people she belonged at this gala, she needed to be able to discuss the cause intelligently. After her shift at the library ended at 5, she rushed home to prepare. She showered, carefully applied makeup, more than her usual touch of mascara and lip gloss, and styled her hair in an elegant updo that had taken 3 YouTube tutorials to master. The blue dress still fit perfectly, skimming over her curves and falling to the floor in a simple, classic silhouette. Her only jewelry was a pair of silver earrings that had belonged to her mother, small but tasteful. Looking in the mirror, Emma hardly recognized herself. She looked sophisticated, polished, almost like she belonged in Alexander Morgan's world. Almost, but not quite. At precisely 7, her phone buzzed with a text. "Car waiting downstairs." Taking a deep breath, Emma grabbed her small clutch purse and headed down to the street, where the same sleek Bentley from before waited at the curb. The driver opened the door, and to her surprise, Alexander was already inside. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look even more imposing than he had in his business suit. But it was his expression when he saw her that caught Emma off guard, a flash of genuine appreciation before his features settled back into their usual controlled mask. "You look beautiful," he said simply as she slid into the seat beside him. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "You clean up pretty well yourself." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "The dress is perfect, though we should discuss jewelry for future events." Emma's hand instinctively went to her mother's earrings. "These have sentimental value." Alexander's gaze softened. "Keep them, of course. I only meant we can arrange for appropriate pieces to accompany your outfits. Part of the illusion, nothing more." "Right. The illusion." Emma smoothed her dress nervously. "Should we discuss our backstory? How we met? How long we've been seeing each other?" "Simple is best. We met through mutual acquaintances several months ago. We've been seeing each other quietly while getting to know one another." He studied her. "Any questions you don't want to answer, deflect to me. Any businessman who presses you too hard will answer to me afterward." The protective edge in his voice was unexpected. "I can handle myself," Emma assured him. "I don't doubt it, but these events can be sharper than they appear." As the car glided through the city streets, Alexander briefed her on key attendees: who to engage with, who to politely avoid, which board members were allies, and which were potential thorns in his side. "Just be yourself," he concluded as they approached the venue, a historic hotel illuminated with spotlights. "Your natural intelligence will serve you better than any rehearsed lines." Emma's stomach tightened as she spotted the red carpet leading to the entrance, lined with photographers. "You didn't mention press." "Local society pages, nothing more," Alexander replied, studying her face. "Is that a problem?" She thought of Mark, Diane's ex-husband, and his expensive lawyers. Would it hurt Diane's custody case if Emma was photographed at a high-society event while her sister struggled to make ends meet? Or would the connection to the Morgan name actually help? No, she decided. Not a problem. Alexander's hand came to rest on hers. "Remember, you're doing them a favor by appearing, not the other way around." The car stopped, and suddenly they were walking the red carpet, Alexander's hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Camera flashes popped around them, and Emma heard photographers calling Alexander's name, asking who his date was. He guided her past them with practiced ease, nodding politely, but not stopping for questions. Inside, the ballroom took Emma's breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from soaring ceilings, tables draped in white linen surrounded a dance floor, and ice sculptures in the shape of children holding hands served as centerpieces. Hundreds of guests in formal attire mingled, the air filled with the soft strains of a string quartet and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. "Intimidating, isn't it?" Alexander murmured close to her ear. "Just remember, most of these people are more concerned with how they appear than with judging you." "Easy for you to say," Emma whispered back. "You were born into this world." A shadow crossed his face. "Not exactly, but that's a story for another time." Before she could ask what he meant, they were approached by an older couple, the man silver-haired and distinguished, the woman regal in a burgundy gown. "Alexander, how good of you to come," the woman said, air-kissing his cheek before turning curious eyes to Emma. "Margaret, Robert, may I introduce Emma Taylor?" Alexander said smoothly, his hand returning to the small of Emma's back. "Emma, Margaret and Robert Kensington. Margaret chairs the hospital board." "Lovely to meet you," Emma said, extending her hand. "The work you're doing with the pediatric oncology wing is remarkable." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly in pleased surprise. "You're familiar with our programs?" "Emma has a particular interest in community outreach," Alexander interjected, "especially programs that serve children." The conversation flowed more easily than Emma had expected. Her research paid off as she asked thoughtful questions about the hospital's initiatives, and she found herself genuinely interested in Margaret's passionate responses. "Where have you been hiding this delightful young woman, Alexander?" Robert asked with a knowing smile. "Not hiding," Alexander replied, his eyes meeting Emma's. "Just taking our time." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. He was playing a role, she reminded herself. This was all for show. As the evening progressed, Emma was introduced to dozens of people, business associates, hospital staff, society figures, whose names she recognized from news headlines. To her surprise, she found herself enjoying many of the conversations, particularly with the doctors who spoke candidly about their work. "You're a natural at this," Alexander said as he guided her toward their table for dinner. "Everyone is charmed." "I'm just asking questions and listening," Emma replied. "People love to talk about their passions." Alexander's eyes lingered on her face. An insight many in this room could benefit from. Throughout dinner, Emma was acutely aware of Alexander beside her. The brush of his arm against hers as he reached for his water glass, the subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth of his thigh occasionally pressing against hers beneath the table. For a man who radiated such control and reserve, he was surprisingly tactile, his hand often finding the small of her back or her elbow as they moved through the crowd. It was all part of the illusion, she reminded herself, necessary touches to sell their supposed relationship. After the meal and speeches, the orchestra struck up a waltz, and couples began moving to the dance floor. "Shall we?" Alexander asked, standing and offering his hand. Emma hesitated. "I should warn you, I'm not much of a dancer." "Just follow my lead," he said, his voice low and confident. And somehow, in his arms, dancing came naturally. Alexander guided her with subtle pressure from his hand on her back, anticipating her movements before she made them. They moved together as if they'd danced 100 times before, his sure steps and her natural grace creating a perfect partnership. "You lied to me," he murmured, his lips close to her ear. Emma tensed. "About what?" "You said you couldn't dance, yet here you are, putting half the room to shame." She relaxed, smiling up at him. "I said I wasn't much of a dancer. You're doing all the work." "Hardly." His hand pressed slightly firmer against her back, drawing her a fraction closer. "It takes two people to dance this well together." The double meaning wasn't lost on Emma. They were dancing in more ways than one tonight, a carefully choreographed performance for the benefit of watching eyes. Yet in this moment, with his arms around her and their bodies moving in perfect synchrony, the line between performance and reality felt dangerously thin. As the music ended, Alexander's hand lingered on her waist. "Would you like some air?" he asked, nodding toward the terrace doors. Emma nodded, suddenly needing space to clear her head. The terrace overlooked the city lights, the autumn air crisp but not uncomfortable. Emma leaned against the stone balustrade, breathing deeply. "You're doing remarkably well," Alexander said, coming to stand beside her. "Better than I could have hoped." "Thank you for the vote of confidence," she replied with a small smile. "Though I still feel like an imposter." "Don't we all?" he said quietly. Emma turned to look at him, surprised by the candor. "Even you?" Alexander gazed out at the city lights. "Perhaps especially me." Before she could ask what he meant, the terrace doors opened, and a striking woman in a red dress stepped out. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant chignon, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. "Alexander," she said, her voice like honey poured over ice. "I thought that was you." Emma felt Alexander tense beside her. "Victoria," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "I didn't realize you were on the guest list." Last-minute invitation. Victoria's gaze slid to Emma, assessing and dismissive in a single glance. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" "Emma Taylor," Alexander said, his hand finding the small of Emma's back again. "Emma, this is Victoria Blackwell." The ex-girlfriend, Emma realized, remembering Diane's warnings. The one who had apparently left Alexander more closed off than ever. "Charmed," Victoria said without warmth. Her attention returned to Alexander. "The Richardson merger is moving forward, I hear." "Congratulations." "Thank you," Alexander replied, his tone neutral, "though I don't recall that information being public yet." Victoria's red lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I have my sources. Always have." She stepped closer, placing a manicured hand on his arm. "We should catch up sometime, Alex, for old time's sake." Emma felt Alexander's back stiffen under her palm. When had she placed her hand there? "I'm afraid my schedule is quite full these days," he replied, his voice cooling several degrees. Victoria's gaze flickered between them, calculation evident in her eyes. "I see. Well, don't let me interrupt your evening." She nodded curtly to Emma. "Nice meeting you, Emily." "Emma," she corrected automatically. Victoria's smile tightened. "Of course." After she disappeared back inside, Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Ex-girlfriend?" "Ex-fiancé," Alexander corrected, his jaw tight. "And the reason I needed our arrangement. She's been making noise about reconciling since she discovered the Richardson deal would make me a significant stakeholder in her father's company." "I see." Emma studied his profile, the tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "That must be difficult." Alexander turned to her, surprise flickering across his features. "Most people would ask for details of the breakup." "It's not my business," Emma replied simply. "And whatever happened clearly still bothers you." He was quiet for a moment, then said, She was sharing confidential information about upcoming deals with her father's investment firm, using our relationship to help him position ahead of market movements. That's illegal, isn't it? Borderline, unethical, certainly. His expression darkened. I discovered it the week before our wedding. Emma's heart constricted unexpectedly. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a valuable lesson in trusting my instincts. Alexander checked his watch. We should return inside. The auction will be starting soon. As they re-entered the ballroom, Emma felt Victoria's eyes following them. The woman leaned close to an older man, whispering something that made him glance their way with interest. The auction was for experiences donated by local businesses, a private yacht cruise, cooking lessons with a celebrity chef, a weekend at a luxury spa. Alexander bid generously on several items, winning a private tour of the city's art museum that made Emma's eyes light up despite herself. You like art? He asked, noticing her reaction. I love it, she admitted. I studied art history before switching to library science when I realized I needed a more practical degree. Something shifted in Alexander's expression. We'll have to use those tickets then. Oh, I didn't mean… I know you didn't. His hand found hers under the table, giving it a gentle squeeze that felt nothing like the calculated touches they'd exchanged all evening. I'd like to go, with you. Emma told herself the warmth spreading through her chest was simply pleasure at the thought of visiting the museum, not the intensity in Alexander's gray eyes or the feel of his hand covering hers. As the evening wound down, Emma excused herself to use the restroom. Inside, she found Victoria touching up her lipstick in the mirror. Ah, the librarian, Victoria said, her eyes meeting Emma's in the reflection. Alexander's assistant mentioned his new girlfriend works at the public library. Quite a charming occupation. Emma stiffened. How did she know that? Excuse me, she said, attempting to move past. Victoria turned, blocking her path. A word of advice, from someone who knows Alexander intimately. He tires of his toys quickly, especially the simple ones. Enjoy the borrowed jewelry in fancy parties while they last. I'm not wearing borrowed jewelry, Emma replied evenly. And I don't consider myself anyone's toy. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Don't fool yourself, darling. Alexander Morgan doesn't seriously date women like you. You're a distraction, nothing more, probably to make me jealous. She laughed softly, as if that would work. Emma met her gaze steadily. If you'll excuse me, Alexander is waiting. She managed to keep her composure until she was inside a stall, where she pressed a hand against her racing heart. Victoria's words shouldn't bother her. This wasn't a real relationship, after all. She was being paid to play a part. But something about the woman's dismissive assessment stung more than it should have. When she returned to Alexander's side, he immediately sensed her discomfort. What happened? He asked, his voice low. Nothing important, Emma replied, forcing a smile. Just a reminder that not everyone here is as nice as Margaret Kensington. Alexander's eyes scanned the room, landing on Victoria, who raised her champagne glass in a mocking toast. Whatever she said, ignore it, he said, his hand pressing protectively against Emma's back. Victoria specializes in elegant cruelty. As they prepared to leave, Emma noticed several people watching them with interest, some smiling approvingly, others whispering behind their hands. Their performance had been noticed, as intended. In the car returning to her apartment, Emma kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. That was intense. You were magnificent, Alexander said, surprising her with his candor. Everyone was impressed. Even Victoria? Emma asked before she could stop herself. Alexander's expression hardened. Especially Victoria. She doesn't like competition. I'm hardly competition, Emma said, remembering Victoria's cutting words. We're from different worlds. Don't sell yourself short, Alexander replied, his voice serious. You connected with more people tonight than Victoria did in a year of these events. You listened. You cared. That's rare in my world. The sincerity in his voice made Emma's chest tighten. This was becoming complicated in ways she hadn't anticipated. Alexander Morgan was supposed to be a means to an end, a solution to her financial problems. He wasn't supposed to make her heart race when he looked at her like that, as if he could see something in her that others missed. When they reached her apartment building, Alexander insisted on walking her to her door. You don't have to, she protested. This isn't a real date. Humor me, he replied. My mother raised me with certain standards. At her door, Emma turned to thank him for the evening, only to find him standing closer than she expected. His eyes dark in the dimly lit hallway. Our next event is Friday, he said. A dinner at my home with some key investors. More intimate than tonight. Is that acceptable? Emma nodded, suddenly very aware of how alone they were in the quiet hallway. The car will collect you at 6, Alexander continued, making no move to step away. And Emma? Thank you for tonight. It was unexpectedly enjoyable. Before she could respond, he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek, his lips lingering just a moment longer than strictly necessary. Good night, he murmured, then turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing at her door with her fingertips pressed to the spot where his lips had touched her skin. Inside her apartment, she carefully removed her mother's earrings and hung up the blue dress. As she changed into her pajamas, her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. How was it? Details, please. Emma stared at the screen, unsure how to put the evening into words. How could she explain the complicated emotions swirling inside her? The triumph of navigating a world so different from her own, the sting of Victoria's dismissal, and, most confusing of all, the unexpected connection she felt with a man who was paying her to pretend. It was fine, she texted back, tell you tomorrow. But as she lay in bed that night, Emma knew fine didn't begin to cover it. Something had shifted during those hours at Alexander's side. Something that made their carefully constructed arrangement feel suddenly dangerously real. The photographs appeared in the society pages the next morning. Emma discovered them during her Sunday shift at the library, when Mia practically sprinted across the reference desk with her phone. Why didn't you tell me you're dating Alexander Morgan? She hissed, thrusting the screen into Emma's face. There they were, captured mid-dance. Alexander's hand at her waist, their eyes locked in what appeared to be an intimate gaze. The caption read, Morgan Industries CEO Alexander Morgan and new flame Emma Taylor share a moment at Children's Hospital benefit. It's complicated, Emma said, her cheeks burning as she handed the phone back. Complicated? Mia's eyes widened. Emma, he's one of the richest men in the city, not to mention gorgeous. What's complicated about that? Everything, Emma thought. The fact that their relationship was a business arrangement. The fact that she was being paid to look at him the way she had in that photograph. The fact that, despite all that, the emotions captured in that image felt disturbingly genuine. Please keep this quiet, she told Mia. We're taking things slowly. But by lunchtime, it was clear that quiet wasn't an option. 3 patrons had recognized her, and her phone was buzzing with messages from friends she hadn't spoken to in months. Even her landlady had cornered her that morning, suddenly offering to fix the leaky faucet that had been broken for weeks. The most concerning message came from Diane. Mark's lawyer called. They've seen the photos, requesting an urgent meeting. Call me. Emma's stomach dropped. This was exactly what she'd feared, that her association with Alexander would somehow complicate Diane's custody case. She called her sister immediately. They're spinning it like I'm neglecting Lily, while my family mingles with millionaires, Diane said, her voice tight with stress. Suggesting I'm unstable because I sent you to impersonate me at school, while you're apparently living some secret high society life. That's ridiculous, Emma protested. And technically, I'm being paid. It's a job. Try explaining that to a family court judge, Diane sighed. Mark's making it sound like we're both deceptive and unreliable. Emma closed her eyes, guilt washing over her. I'm so sorry, Diane. I never meant to make things worse. It's not your fault, her sister replied. Mark would have found something to use against me no matter what. But maybe you should reconsider this arrangement with Alexander. At least until after the custody hearing. The money from this is paying for your lawyer, Emma reminded her gently. There was a long pause. I know, Diane finally said. I just don't want you getting hurt either. Emotionally, I mean. After they hung up, Emma sat in the library's break room, turning her phone over in her hands. Perhaps she should call Alexander and end their arrangement. The publicity was already creating complications she hadn't anticipated, but before she could decide, her phone lit up with his name. "I assume you've seen the photographs," he said when she answered, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes," Emma replied. "They're convincing." "Too convincing?" "You sound troubled." Emma hesitated, then decided on honesty. "My sister's ex-husband is using them against her in a custody battle, suggesting our family is deceptive because I pretended to be her at the school event, while apparently secretly dating a millionaire." There was a silence on the other end. Then, "I see. That is an unfortunate complication." "I'm sorry," Emma said quickly. "This is my problem, not yours. I just—" "What's the lawyer's name?" Alexander interrupted. "What?" "Your sister's ex-husband's lawyer. What's the name?" "Harrison James, I think." "Why?" "Leave it with me," Alexander said, his tone shifting to something cooler and more businesslike. "Would you be available to meet tomorrow evening? There's something I'd like to discuss regarding our arrangement." Emma frowned at the sudden change in his demeanor. "Yes, I'm free after 6. "Good. I'll have Frank collect you. And Emma, try not to worry about your sister's situation. These things have a way of resolving themselves." The call ended, leaving Emma with a strange sense of foreboding. Alexander's voice had taken on that same controlled quality she'd heard when he spoke to Victoria. Remote, calculating, revealing nothing of his true thoughts. The next evening, Frank drove her not to Alexander's penthouse as she'd expected, but to a modest restaurant in her own neighborhood. The kind of place that served excellent food without the pretension of white tablecloths or crystal stemware. Alexander was waiting at a corner table, dressed more casually than she'd seen him before, dark jeans and a gray sweater that matched his eyes. He stood when she approached, that same inscrutable expression on his face. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out her chair. "This is unexpected," Emma replied, gesturing to their surroundings. "I thought your idea of casual dining involved crystal and sommeliers." A smile flickered across his face. "I'm not entirely divorced from reality, despite what the press might suggest." Once they'd ordered, Alexander folded his hands on the table, his expression growing serious. "I owe you an apology," he began. "I failed to consider how our arrangement might impact your personal life, particularly your sister's situation." Emma blinked in surprise. "That's hardly your fault. I should have thought it through more carefully. Nevertheless," he continued, "I've taken steps to address it." A chill ran down Emma's spine. "What does that mean?" "Harrison James no longer represents your sister's ex-husband," Alexander said calmly. "He withdrew from the case this morning, citing a conflict of interest." Emma stared at him. "How did you—" "James's firm handles legal matters for several companies that do significant business with Morgan Industries," Alexander explained, as if discussing the weather. "I simply pointed out that representing someone in a case against a person connected to me constituted such a conflict." "You threatened his business," Emma translated, unsure whether to be impressed or alarmed. Alexander's expression hardened slightly. "I reminded him of his professional obligations. Mark has already retained new counsel, but the delay works in your sister's favor. And I've arranged for a friend of mine to represent Diane, Patricia Chen. She's the best family lawyer in the state." Emma's mouth opened, then closed. "Alexander, we can't afford—" "Patricia owes me a favor," he interrupted. "Several, actually. She's happy to take the case pro bono." "Why would you do this?" Emma asked, genuinely confused. "Our arrangement is about appearances at social events. You didn't sign up for my family's legal problems." Alexander was quiet for a moment, studying her with those intense gray eyes. "Perhaps I dislike seeing someone use wealth and influence to bully those with fewer resources." "Most people would say you just did exactly that," Emma pointed out. "The difference," Alexander replied, "is intent. Your sister's ex abandoned his child until it became convenient to play father. My intent is to level a playing field he deliberately tilted." There was something in his voice, a controlled anger, a principle she hadn't expected, that made Emma see him differently. This wasn't just about their arrangement. Somehow this had become personal for him. "Thank you," she said simply. Diane will be overwhelmed. No thanks necessary, Alexander replied, relaxing slightly. Though this does bring me to the purpose of our meeting. I think we should adjust our arrangement. Emma's heart sank. He was going to end it, of course. The complications weren't worth the benefit of having a fake girlfriend at social events. I understand, she said quickly. The press attention is more than you bargained for. And now with Diane's situation. Actually, Alexander interrupted, I was going to suggest we become more public, not less. Emma stared at him. I don't understand. The photographs from the gala have generated exactly the response I wanted in my business circles. The board is pleased to see me, quote, moving on from Victoria. Potential investors are reassured by my apparent stability, and several key partners have specifically mentioned being impressed by you. By me? Emma couldn't hide her surprise. You're authentic, Alexander said simply. It's a rare quality in my world. People respond to it. Their food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. As they began eating, Emma considered his words. More public appearances meant more money for Diane's case, but also more complications. What exactly would this entail? She asked finally. 3 events per week instead of 1, Alexander replied. Some business dinners, some social functions. You would need to reduce your hours at the diner, possibly eliminate them entirely. I can't afford to. I would compensate you accordingly, he assured her. The equivalent of both your current salaries, plus an additional amount for the increased visibility. Emma set down her fork. That's very generous. It's fair, Alexander corrected. And there's one more element. For this to be convincing, we would need to be seen together, outside of official events. Casual dinners like this one. Perhaps weekends occasionally. You want to pretend to date. For real? Emma said slowly. Alexander's mouth quirked. An apt if somewhat contradictory way to put it. The financial security he was offering was beyond anything Emma had dreamed possible. She could help Diane win her custody case, pay off her student loans, maybe even start saving for the future. But the cost would be spending most of her free time with Alexander Morgan, blurring the already thin line between their professional arrangement and something more personal. I need time to think about it, she said finally. Of course, Alexander nodded. Take whatever time you need. They finished their meal discussing lighter topics, books they'd both read, places they'd traveled, childhood memories that revealed more about Alexander than Emma suspected he usually shared. He'd grown up with wealth, yes, but his father had been demanding and cold, his mother loving but frequently absent on charity missions. The household staff raised me more than my parents, he admitted, particularly our housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. She taught me to cook, believe it or not. You cook? Emma couldn't hide her surprise. Nothing fancy, Alexander smiled, but I can manage more than toast. As they walked back to her apartment, Alexander had insisted, despite her protests, that it wasn't necessary. Emma found herself studying his profile in the streetlight. There were layers to this man that the public persona of Alexander Morgan, ruthless CEO, didn't reveal. A compassion she hadn't expected. A complexity that intrigued her more than she wanted to admit. At her door, he maintained a respectful distance, unlike the previous night. Take your time with the decision, he said, but I hope you'll consider it. I will, Emma promised, and thank you again for Diane's lawyer. It means more than you know. Something softened in his expression. Good night, Emma. She watched him walk away, torn between the practical benefits of his offer and the emotional complications it would inevitably bring. Because the truth she was finding increasingly difficult to deny was that her reaction to Alexander Morgan had nothing to do with their business arrangement and everything to do with the man himself. The next day, Emma met Patricia Chen at her downtown office. The lawyer was everything Alexander had promised. Brilliant, strategic, and surprisingly warm. Alexander rarely asks for favors, Patricia told her as they reviewed Diane's case. When he does, they usually involve helping people who remind him of himself. How could my sister possibly remind Alexander Morgan of himself? Emma asked, confused. Patricia studied her thoughtfully. Did he tell you about his nephew? The real reason he was at that school event? Just that his sister is overseas. His sister died 3 years ago, Patricia said quietly. Cancer. Alexander has been raising his nephew ever since. fighting the boy's father for custody every step of the way. A father who, like your sister's ex, showed little interest until there was money involved. Emma felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. He never mentioned. He wouldn't, Patricia interrupted gently. Alexander is intensely private about his personal life, particularly about Sam. The boy is the center of his world, though you'd never know it from his public persona. 1,000 small details suddenly rearranged themselves in Emma's mind. Alexander's unexpected appearance at career day, his genuine interest in the children at the hospital gala, his immediate understanding of Diane's situation, the protective edge that entered his voice when discussing her case. Does anyone know? About his nephew? Very few, Patricia replied. Alexander keeps Sam completely shielded from the press. The public knows his sister passed away, but the assumption is that Sam lives with his father. In reality, he attends boarding school during the week, for his safety and privacy as much as his education, and spends weekends and holidays with Alexander. As Emma left Patricia's office, her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Patricia, up to speed? Yes, she replied. Thank you again. She's incredible. She hesitated, then added, Why didn't you tell me about Sam? There was a long pause before his response. Some aspects of my life remain private, regardless of our arrangement. The formality of his reply stung more than Emma wanted to admit. She'd thought they were developing something beyond their business agreement. If not a romance, then at least a friendship. But his message was clear. There were boundaries she wasn't to cross. That evening, after speaking with Diane and confirming their meeting with Patricia the next day, Emma made her decision. She called Alexander. I accept your proposal, she said without preamble when he answered. The expanded arrangement, the increased visibility, all of it. I'm pleased to hear it, he replied, his voice revealing nothing of his thoughts. I'll have a revised contract sent over tomorrow. There's one condition, Emma added. A pause. Yes? I want honesty between us, at least in private. If we're going to convince the world we're in a relationship, we need to trust each other with the truth. Another longer pause. That's reasonable, though some matters will remain private. I understand boundaries, Emma assured him. I'm not asking for your deepest secrets. Just enough truth that I'm not blindsided. Agreed, Alexander said finally. Shall we begin Friday? There's a gallery opening I'm expected to attend. Friday works, Emma replied, wondering if she'd just made the best decision of her life or the worst. The next week passed in a whirlwind. Emma reduced her hours at the diner to just 2 shifts a week, using the advance Alexander had sent to pay off her most pressing bills. Diane met with Patricia and came away with renewed hope for her custody case. And a delivery arrived at Emma's apartment. 3 stunning dresses for upcoming events, along with a note, your choice which to wear, all will suit you perfectly. By Friday, Emma had almost convinced herself that her new arrangement with Alexander was purely professional, despite Patricia's revelations about his personal life. Then she opened her door to find him waiting in the hallway instead of in the car, and all her carefully constructed rationalizations crumbled. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit, his hair slightly tousled as if he'd run his hand through it, his eyes warming when they landed on her. I thought I'd walk you down, he explained. Part of being more convincing. Of course, Emma replied, suddenly flustered. She'd chosen the simplest of the 3 dresses, an emerald green silk that brought out the amber flecks in her eyes. Based on Alexander's expression, her choice had been a good one. You look beautiful, he said simply. Thank you, she replied, locking her door. The dress is perfect. It's not the dress, Alexander murmured, offering his arm. In the car, he briefed her on the gallery opening, a showcase of emerging artists, several of whom Morgan Industries had sponsored through their charitable foundation. You never mentioned your company supports the arts, Emma said. Another initiative of my sister's, Alexander replied, a shadow crossing his face. Catherine was passionate about nurturing new talent. Emma hesitated, then decided to test their new agreement of honesty. Patricia told me about Sam, she said quietly. About how you've been raising him. Alexander's expression tightened. Patricia talks too much. She thought I already knew, Emma explained. She mentioned it because she was explaining why Diane's case matters to you personally. He was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the passing city lights. Sam was 5 when Catherine died, he finally said. His father had been absent since he was an infant, suddenly showed up wanting custody when he realized Sam would inherit Catherine's trust fund. That's awful, Emma said softly. We reached a compromise, Alexander continued, his voice controlled. Sam attends Westfield, the same school where we met, and spends weekends with me. His father gets him during school breaks, though Sam usually calls begging to come home after a few days. He's lucky to have you, Emma said, touched by the glimpse of vulnerability beneath Alexander's usual reserve. I'm the lucky one, he replied, meeting her eyes. Sam saved me as much as I saved him. Gave me purpose beyond just accumulating wealth and power. Something shifted between them in that moment. A deepening of trust, a layer of pretense falling away. Emma realized that Alexander was sharing something precious with her, something he rarely revealed to others. Thank you, she said simply, for telling me. He nodded, then looked away, composing himself. The gallery will be crowded. Victoria may be there. Her family collects art. If she approaches us, let me handle it. Emma accepted the change of subject, recognizing that Alexander had shared as much as he was comfortable with for now. Of course. The gallery was indeed crowded, filled with the city's cultural elite mingling among striking contemporary artworks. Alexander kept his hand at the small of Emma's back as they moved through the space, introducing her to collectors, critics, and artists with the easy confidence of someone who belonged in this world. To Emma's surprise, she found herself genuinely enjoying the evening. The art was fascinating, bold, challenging pieces that sparked real emotion, and many of the artists were passionate about their work in a way that transcended the pretension she'd expected. What do you think? Alexander asked, as they paused before a large abstract canvas dominated by swirls of blue and gold. It's beautiful, Emma replied honestly. Like looking at the moment of creation, chaos and order existing simultaneously. The artist, a young woman with blue-streaked hair who had been hovering nearby, broke into a delighted smile. That's exactly what I was trying to capture. Most people just say it looks like pretty colors. Alexander watched their ensuing conversation with a pleased expression, only interrupting when a photographer from the arts section of the local paper approached for a photo. The mysterious couple everyone's talking about, the photographer joked. Mind if I get a shot for our coverage? Alexander looked to Emma for confirmation. When she nodded, he drew her closer, his arm settling comfortably around her waist. Perfect, the photographer said after snapping several images. You two look like you've been together for years. The comment lingered in Emma's mind as they continued through the gallery. They did move together with a natural ease that belied their short acquaintance. Alexander seemed to anticipate her interests, guiding her toward pieces she found most compelling. She, in turn, had learned to read his subtle cues, when he wanted to exit a tedious conversation, when he was genuinely engaged, when he needed a moment of quiet amid the social demands. It was midway through the evening when Emma spotted Victoria across the room, watching them with narrowed eyes. The blonde woman wore a striking red dress that seemed, "The Blackwell Foundation sounds fascinating," she said, her voice sincere despite the insinuation in Victoria's tone. Which pieces have caught your eye tonight? I'm particularly drawn to Marina Chen's work. Her use of negative space is revolutionary. Victoria blinked, clearly surprised by Emma's knowledgeable response. I haven't formed an opinion yet. Emma has quite an eye, Alexander said, his expression softening as he looked at her. She studied art history before library science. Did she? Victoria's smile tightened. How versatile. Speaking of versatility, Emma continued pleasantly, I was just reading about your father's company. The pivot toward sustainable energy investments is impressive. Was that your influence by chance? Victoria's eyes widened slightly. Alexander's hand squeezed Emma's waist in what felt distinctly like approval. I may have suggested it, Victoria replied, suddenly less certain of her footing. Smart move. Emma nodded. The market projections for renewables are exceptional over the next decade. Before Victoria could respond, a distinguished older man approached their group. Victoria, there you are. The gallery director wants to introduce us to someone. Daddy, Victoria said, regaining her composure. "You remember Alexander Morgan." "Of course," Mr. Blackwell said, extending his hand. "Morgan, good to see you." "The Richardson deal seems to be moving along." "It is," Alexander confirmed, shaking the man's hand firmly. "And this is?" Mr. Blackwell looked expectantly at Emma. "Emma Taylor," Alexander said, his voice warming. "My partner. Partner. Not date, not companion, but partner." The word hung in the air between them, carrying a weight that seemed to exceed their arrangement. "Pleasure," Mr. Blackwell said, shaking Emma's hand with more interest than she'd expected. "Any relation to the Taylors of Boston?" "No relation," Emma smiled. "Just ordinary Taylors from right here in the city." "Emma works at the public library," Victoria added, the slight emphasis making it clear she considered this a mark against her. To her surprise, Mr. Blackwell's face lit up. "The main branch downtown? Magnificent building. I'm on the Historical Preservation Committee that oversaw the renovation of the reading room." "It's breathtaking," Emma said sincerely. "The restoration of the ceiling murals alone was worth every penny." "You know about that?" Mr. Blackwell looked delighted. "Most people never look up." "Emma notices details others miss," Alexander said, and the pride in his voice seemed entirely unfeigned. "It's one of her many gifts." Victoria watched this exchange with thinly veiled displeasure. "We should find the gallery director, Daddy. You wanted to discuss that sculpture for the foyer." As they moved away, Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was intense. "You were brilliant," Alexander said, turning to face her fully. "Absolutely brilliant." "I just talked about art and business," Emma shrugged. "Nothing special." "You knocked Victoria completely off balance," Alexander corrected, "and impressed her father, which she'll find far more irritating than any cutting remark could have been." Emma laughed despite herself. "That wasn't my intention." "Which is precisely why it worked," Alexander said, his eyes warm with admiration. "You're authentic, Emma. It's your superpower." The way he was looking at her made her heart race. This wasn't part of their performance. There was no one close enough to overhear, no photographer capturing the moment. This was just Alexander, looking at her as if she were something precious and unexpected. "Should we get some air?" she suggested, suddenly needing space to collect her thoughts. Alexander nodded, guiding her toward a small terrace at the back of the gallery. Outside, the autumn night was cool but not cold, the city lights creating a backdrop of twinkling stars below the darkened sky. "Better?" he asked as Emma took a deep breath. "Yes," she replied, though her racing heart had little to do with the crowded gallery and everything to do with the man standing beside her. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the city. Then Alexander spoke, his voice quiet. "I've been thinking about our agreement, the honesty clause." Emma turned to look at him. "Yes?" "There's something I haven't told you," he said, his expression serious. "Something important. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.